Hi, I'm Beth from Sew Country, and today is the second sewing marathon for the year 2024. Today we are sewing up the Sander Sling from KiteCo Creates. This is the first one I sewed. I made this one during the testing period for this pattern, and I really wanted it to be just kind of girly and fun, very nature oriented. So you can see I have a flap here in the front, a slip pocket, the zipper pocket for the lining. I made mine as a sling, but this pattern can be made as a crossbody. And I have a sling, the attachment for the sling here at the bottom. Inside, it opens wide, and you can do slip pockets inside. You could even do a zipper pocket if you wanted to, but the pattern is wrote with slip pockets. It's a very thin bag, very durable, so it's the perfect size to be able to take whenever you just need to take a few things. You want to go on a hike, you want to go out running errands. This is a great grab and go bag. Since my first version was kind of girly and fun, I wanted to do something that looked a little more rustic. For my version today, I'm using this gorgeous print from Jen's Fabrics. I'm going to have the link for where you can get this fabric in my description, but this is a cotton woven, and I interfaced everything with a medium weight interfacing, and then a couple pieces, which I'll explain, I put Decaville line on. Let's go ahead and talk about all the pieces that I'm going to be using to make my version of this pattern. Mine is going to be a sling again. I am choosing to do the front flap just like I did with my last version. So we're going to start talking first about our interior pieces. For my interior, I'm going to need just a few pieces. I will need my body lining, which is piece E. I'll have a front and a back, so 2 pieces. And then I'll have 2 slip pockets. I'll have my credit card slip pocket, which is F1, and my just regular slip pocket, which is F2. You can do one or both, either or, no big deal on that. I'm also going to have 2 pieces of trim, and I think this is called, yes, FT trim. So I have 2 pieces of that. My trim needs to be a non-fraying material, so I do have that cut to the pattern measurements. This pattern comes with all the pattern pieces you need, so if you're someone who likes the pattern pieces, you can use that to cut out everything. Everything in my lining except my trim is that cotton woven with the medium weight interfacing. No Decaville light on any of my interior pieces. Now let's look at the exterior pieces. I'm doing the flap. For my version, it is optional, and I did interface this with cotton woven, and then I did add a piece of Decaville light that's kept out of the seam allowance. I did go ahead and transfer my magnetic snap from the pattern piece. So that's the flap. The front pocket, I'm going to use this panel again from Jen's Fabrics, and I did interface both the exterior of the front pocket and the lining with a medium weight interfacing, and this is C, your front pocket, and then I also transferred over that magnetic snap from the pattern piece. These are the 2 pieces that will make that front. I'm going to add a piece of piping around my flap. This is optional. I'm going to be using this material to make the piping. For the back, for the sling version, you'll have 2 pieces for that. I had them both interfaced with the medium weight interfacing. And then on one of them, I put the Decaville light, kept out of the seam allowance. This is D, your sling tab. You have 2 top pieces for your exterior. This is top, the B. I do have Decaville light on both of these, kept out of the seam allowance, and then I have them both interfaced with the medium weight interfacing. This is H. This is going to be 2 pieces. I'm going to cut part of it off, but this is going to be the bar that's going to go across the bottom of the back exterior for my sling to attach. Let me show you here. So it'll be this piece here, but it'll also be this piece here. So we'll cut that down. So for me, I'm using a woven material that frays. So I'm going to have to do a double fold on this so that everything's encased inside there. I went ahead and drew the line down the center so I know how to get it started with the folding. This will be one of the first things I do just to get it out of the way. Last thing we'd have is, this is A, our body front and our body back. Just don't get confused. This pattern piece is different than your lining. You can't cut all of the 4 pieces out. Your exterior and your lining are different pattern pieces. They look a little similar, but they are different. So those are the fabrics that I need. I'm going to talk a little bit about the hardware I'm using and some of the extras. I'm going to have 1 piece of number 5 zipper tape. I am going to have 1 swivel hook. I'm using 1 inch for everything. 1 rectangular bar, 1 D-ring, 1 zipper pull, 1 adjustable bar. I'm using a magnetic riveted snap. You can use whatever kind of snap if you want. On my first one, I didn't use any snap or closure at all on the flap. But this one I want to do a magnetic snap because I'm thinking that piping will be a little bit extra bulky, and if I don't have this, it'll just flip up. I'm going to add 2 tags to my bag. This one will be on the exterior, this one will be on the interior. Both of these are from Heartwood and Hide. Those are all the pieces I need to create this pattern. And so I'm going to go ahead and get a couple things prepped. First thing I want to do is I want to take this piece and go ahead and fold the raw edge to that line down the middle, and then do the same for the other side so they will both meet on that line, and then I will fold them so that it is a 4-way fold where everything is encased, no raw edges showing. I'm just going to clip this, and then I will top stitch down both sides. If you want to take this over to the iron, you can. If you wanted to use double-sided tape, you could. In the pattern, she gives you instructions as to if you wanted to use a raw edge material of how you would cut this piece actually in half. There is a mark on the pattern piece. If you want to do that, it would be easier to save a little bit of bulk if you're using like a thicker material. So that piece is ready. I'm going to set it aside. It will be one of the first things we sew. I'm also going to pull out that front pocket. I'm going to take the exterior and the lining piece. I'm simply going to place them right sides together. They match it perfectly, of course. We'll start sewing here at the bottom, go to the side, and go up, back stitch here. We're going to back stitch here, leaving this part open, but back stitch here and then go around that curve, back stitch again, break your stitches, come over here, back stitch, go all the way down, pivot, back stitch here, leaving an opening for us to turn the pocket through. Set this aside. I'm going to pull out these 2 pockets for my lining, and we're going to work on both of these at the same time. No matter which version you do, you're going to do it the same. You're going to fold them right sides together, and you're just going to sew down both the sides, leaving this top part open. We will turn it through that top spot, and then that is where we'll put that trim on the pocket, just so it closes up that raw edge without adding any extra bulk. So on both of these, you'll start sewing at the top side and go down, making sure you backstitch when you start and stop. Both tops will be left open. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab out this flat piece. I'm going to go and grab my piping, and we're going to add the piping first on mine. If you're not adding your piping, you're simply going to put the 2 pieces together to sew. But since I'm adding the piping, I'm going to do that first. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to fold this piece of vinyl in half. And then I'm going to clip it, the raw edge, against the raw edge of this flap. I'm going to have a little bit overhanging. And I'm just going to start clipping this in place. On the curve, I'm just going to kind of slowly curve that around. And I will lose just a little bit of the point of this curve, but I think it'll still look okay. The reason why I'm going to choose to lose a little bit of that sharp point is just because I want the piping to lay smoothly. And if I try to keep that really sharp peak, the piping would tend to have a crease whenever I was finished. You can see how it has a little crease there, but it won't be too bad once I get the proper seam allowance. So here's how it looks so far. These are the pieces I'm going to sew at first. For the piping, I'll just base that in place initially. Then whenever I add the other part of the flap, I'll use the full seam allowance. So let's go ahead and get started sewing these pieces. I will be sewing everything with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to use the measurement given in the pattern to cut this piece into two pieces. One will be for my rectangular ring, one will be for my D-ring. This smaller piece will be for the D-ring. I'm going to go ahead and slide it on and just add a clip there. Actually, I'll probably add two clips there. Okay, set this aside. On this piece, the pattern tells us that we're going to fold these raw edges back a certain measurement. I have that measurement marked already, and I'm just going to fold those back and clip those in place just so the fabric will kind of be learning where it needs to go. So whenever it's time to actually sew this down, it'll already have a little bit of memory there, make it a little bit easier to lay down. This is the one that's going to be putting my D-ring on it. Let me go ahead and put that on there before I add that extra clip actually. So that way I don't have to worry about forgetting it. Okay, I'll set this one aside too for right now. For these slip pockets, I'm going to just cut a diagonal right there in the corner, and then I'll go up and cut another diagonal right here at the top. It's just going to kind of help that bulk a little bit so it lays a little bit better. I want to turn both of these pieces right sides out. I'm going to take my time to get this corner right here pushed out really nicely. If I can't get it with my thumb, I will use my stiletto. Yeah, I just want to poke it out a little bit more. You can take this over to the iron if you want to. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my fingers to kind of poke out those seams and put a few clips in place on the side. You could also even baste across the top of this if you feel like it would be easier for you to handle. But I'm just going to take my trim, fold it in half, and start adding it to this top raw edge. I'm just going to fold it over and clip. So what I'll do is I'll stitch my trim on, and then I'll trim up the edges, and that will have this one done until I'm ready to attach it to the lining. I'll do this same thing for this other pocket. I'll do that off camera, and then you'll see me sew the trim. For the front pocket piece, I'm going to slowly turn it out. So I'm not gonna lie, to get these turned out took way longer than it did the first time I made the bag. So just go slow, take your time. You may have to poke with your stiletto and all that. Now I definitely want to take this over to the ironing board and give it a good iron before I attach it or top stitch it. I knew I was really close to losing my panel, so what I'm gonna do is when I'm ironing, I'm just gonna pull that lining just a little bit down so I can see that top really nicely. And then I'm going to iron everything flat at the bottom. I'll kind of pull there to get that to line up straight and iron that as well and have everything ready for this. I'll go ahead while I'm off camera and do this other pocket. The last thing I will get prepped, we are going to sew this next because I really want to see if it'll work out. I'm going to take the lining side of the flap and just match up all these raw edges. We're going to sew around here, but we're going to leave this top portion open. I always like to use the pattern piece before I sew to make my mark. I made it on the back, but I went ahead and transferred that mark to the front for my magnetic snap because I'm using rivets. If you're using a prong snap, you can go ahead and install yours right now. So whenever I come back, I'm going to sew around here, leaving the top open. I'm going to sew the trim on both of these pockets, and then I'll have this ironed and I'll just top stitch around this curve to get this pocket ready. So those are my next steps. Okay, so the front pocket is top stitch. I have just the bottom closed so that it can like kind of keep that memory of the way I want it to lay. I have both of the slip pockets top stitched here. Everything looks great. The flap, it feels really good when I'm filling it. I feel like everything feels good and it'll look good. I don't want to trim anything in case I need to re-stitch this, so I'm just going to turn it. If I decide to keep it and I need to trim or like cut notches in the curves, I will then, but I'm not going to right now. Also, I want to mention that I have not talked anything about my strap yet because I really don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm using this fabric or if I'm just using webbing. I just haven't decided yet, so I'm still waiting on that. Okay, I see a little denting there, but that's okay. I'm just going to manipulate it a little bit, kind of roll and flat, and I am good with that. I like it. I'm good. Okay, so I am just going to kind of press this out, kind of flatten things down. I'm going to go ahead and top stitch around this flap to get it situated and finished. So I'm just going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from this folded edge of the cotton, not on the piping. So I have a lot of little things prepped and ready to go that I'm going to be working on. And so the first thing I'll be working on is I'm going to attach the tag to the top back exterior piece. So I just have it kind of glued on there right now, and I'm going to stitch around that. I also went ahead and added those magnetic snaps. I riveted mine in place. And so I had those on both the flap and that front pocket. I grabbed out my exterior front piece and I just clipped this pocket on here. So the slip pocket is going to be centered and lining up with the top. The bottom, if you remember, I lifted open so because that's where I turned it. And so what I'll do is I will stitch down one side, pivot, that'll close up that bottom, and then go back up. You should already have this top stitched here, so we won't touch that part at all. After I do that, I'm just going to center this flap between those two pieces and baste across here. I'll go ahead and make sure that it's lined up with my magnetic snap, that it is. For the interior, I'm going to do another one of these tags. I know it doesn't match, but I want to use these tags anytime we're doing one of these marathons, so I'm going to put it inside. It's okay. The pattern tells you where to place these pockets. I'm cheating a little bit and I'm going lower than what the pattern says. I'm okay with that since I want this tag here. That's what I'm choosing to do. I am also choosing to leave both of these pockets on both interior pieces. Let me slide over this other one. Both of them are going to be lower and both of them are not going to be stitched down the middle. Just a personal preference. I want to leave it that way. You can choose to do yours however you want, but that is how I'm doing mine. So you'll see me stitch around the tag. You will see me stitch around the sides and the bottoms of each of these interior pockets. Make sure your pockets are centered. You can definitely use the placement in the pattern for the perfect distance down. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on these steps. Okay, so the front pocket is sewn on with the flap included. Both of my interior pieces, I have everything done with them. If you wanted to be super fancy, putting a rivet on the side of each of these would look so cute, but I'm not doing that. So my interior pieces are done. This back piece, I just got to pull the threads on it, and also the tag on the interior. I got to pull the threads there. For this to finish off the front, I need to add my top band piece. I don't know. I'm going to debate on that in a minute. So I'm not going to attach that. I'm going to go ahead and do these other things, and then we'll come back and work on the rest of it. Well, I changed my mind. I was going to put this on the front and this on the back, but I just don't want that as a feature on the front. I don't like it. So I'm going to switch up and do this. I originally hadn't wanted the tag like so obvious, but that's okay. I would prefer to have it this way than the other way. So what you'll do is you'll just have that top piece, have it orientated the way you want, and then you just flip it down, and you're just going to sew straight across with the seam allowance given in the pattern, and then you'll flip it up and you'll top stitch on this top piece, having the seam underneath where you're top stitching. Whenever we top stitch, we always want to capture, or usually we want to catch that seam whenever we top stitch, and definitely we do on this one. Much better. I love that. That looks really good. So I did decide to go ahead and use webbing for my strap just to make it a little bit easier, and I felt like I had a really nice rustic look that I want for this bag. So all I did was I just fed one end of the strap through an adjustable bar and folded it down so the raw edges was inside, and I'm just going to sew across this. So that's what I'm going to do first. I'm also, when I'm at my machine, going to go ahead and take that D-ring, and I just have it clipped on the top, about half of an inch overhang, and I have the D-ring hanging down. So I'm just going to base that in place. Then I'll take this other piece, so we'll have the exterior and the lining of this D sling tab, and I'm just going to have these pushed together like this, lined up on all the edges, and I'm just going to sew around the side, the top, and the other side, leaving this bottom open. I will then flip it and top stitch it. So I will just do those steps to get myself started sewing up the back of this bag. So now that I have that stitched around, I'm just going to trim up this edge a little bit at the corner, because if not, I'm going to have some extra bulk there whenever I turn it. And I am going to trim this down a little bit. I know a lot of people do not agree with doing that, but I am going to trim just a little. You can leave it long if you're worried, and even use that extra length to put a rivet through if you want to. So no big deal there. Okay, let's just trim a little here at this part too. I just want to trim some places where I know there's a chance for it to get a little bulky. So now I'm going to turn it. I know I'll probably have to use my stiletto up in those corners to get it turned really nicely. I'm just rolling out those seams. I'm going to put a few clips there. You can take it over the iron if you prefer. I'm just being a little bit lazy. So that's how it looks. Now I'm going to top stitch all around this, even this bottom opening, because after I get that top stitch, I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the top of this back piece. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and add this part too. So this is that D-ring tab you have, and I did, if you remember, fold these edges under just so they were finished and not raw. You can also use a piece of vinyl here, whatever you want to use for this piece, but the pattern gives you the markings, and you're just going to lay it down there. I also think it might be pretty to add some rivets if you wanted to. I'm keeping this kind of simple, so I'm just going to sew a square here. I may go back off camera later and add the rivets, but for right now I'm just going to sew. Use the pattern piece to get those markings, and you're just sewing the edges. You want to be able to leave this free, or at least I'm going to. If you're someone who you already know you're wearing this on like say your right side or your left side, you could even put a row of stitches here to have that locked in place, but I want to have the option to choose. Sometimes I want to wear around the front of my body, sometimes I want to wear around the back, sometimes I switch shoulders if one's getting tired. So I am just going to stitch mine down so that my D-ring can move freely from either side. So the way I want is whenever the bag's being lifted up and hung up or anything like that, carried, I want it to look like this. So then I'm going to place it like that. After I have it basted, after I have this basted, I'll take this top B. And so I want the top B to look like this. It is a directional piece. There is a small hump, a curve at the top. And then I'm just going to flip it down so that I will attach it and sew through all these layers to have that attached. I will backstitch at both ends when I start and stop, and I'll just sew it on with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Now after I sew this top B piece on, I need to top stitch. I want to point out something to you. On this front piece, I top stitched this top B piece with the seam allowance going up, and I actually top stitched on the B piece. Now this goes against my OCD a little bit, but I understand why we're doing this next step. We couldn't have top stitched down below on the flap. So on this front part, we couldn't have top stitched down here. We had to stitch up here. It wouldn't have worked out. But on this piece, we're going to have to flip this up and top stitch below. So that kind of like, we're not top stitching on the same piece on this different ones, but there's two really good reasons. One is whenever we put this together, our seams will be able to nestle better. They will be offset to reduce a little bit of bulk there. Even though mine's not really bulky, I'm still reducing some bulk, so we have a better fit. But also, if I top stitched here, this wouldn't lift up good, and when we wear it, we want it to be able to lay easily, and we don't want it to be just kind of pressing down on the back. So we really do need to flip that up, so your seam allowance will go down on this one, but on the front, it's going up. If it bothers your OCD too much, you can do it the other way, but I just wanted to kind of, it helps me whenever I kind of know the reasoning as to why I'm doing something, even if it's bothering me, I'm like, oh, this makes sense, and there's a good reason why the designer did it this way. So that's what we're doing now. I'm just going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away. And now we have our back, our front. I have my webbing. I have both of my lining pieces. I still have a swivel hook that I'm going to use at my strap. I'll do that later. And my zipper tape. I went ahead and put the pull on it, and I folded down the two edges 90 degrees. I did glue mine, but I'll still stitch whenever we're attaching it here. So now it is time to put everything together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my front piece, and the pattern gives us measurements as to how far in on both sides on the front and the back. I'm going to make my marks off camera. I don't like to have rollers on camera just for integrity of the pattern pieces. So I'm going to use the pattern measurements and mark both on the top and on the top of both the back and the front. Okay, now that I have those pieces marked, what I'll do is I'll take a zipper, and I'm just going to put one side. And actually, I just realized I don't need the zipper pull on. It's going to have to come off. Okay, so I'm going to, let's see, I think I want this lining piece to go with this front. So all I'm going to do is take the lining and place it right sides together with the exterior and match everything up. You can baste the zipper in place first if you want to. I'm not going to, and I'm just going to clip around here. I'm going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern, but I'm going to sew between those two marks I made. You will back stitch when you start and stop between those two marks also. Okay, so in case I didn't mention, I did put that zipper on the first mark, and then I stopped sewing on the second mark. I don't know if I was very clear on that, but you're sewing between the two marks, but the zipper starts at that first mark. Now, the pattern designer tells us this is an extra step, but it does help out if you want to do it, is you can just leave the seam here, flip this down, and just stitch between these 2 points. So between where you started sewing, where you stopped sewing, just to kind of anchor the lining to that seam. Now we're going to top stitch again with the exterior in a minute, and so it's not necessary, it's just an extra help. She tells you if you are a confident sewish, you can skip this. but I just thought I would show how it goes. And you're not going to go past that opening or the place where you stopped sewing previously. And so that's how you have it for right now. The zipper is open here. It's open here. The material is unattached on that side, unattached on this side. Okay, we're going to set this aside for a minute. Grab out your back and your other zipper piece. Now, just so you know, if you need to check, this is the way it will go together, so you've got to make sure you put your folded edge on this side. If you put it on that side, it'd be wrong. We'll put it together at the end just to make for sure we do everything right. Take your zipper tape, place it right sides together with the exterior back. And again, put the front of your zipper right there at your first mark, and then you'll stop sewing at your second mark. Before we attach the lining, put these together. Make sure that your zipper tapes have the folded edges at the same side whenever your zippers are together. This is the way it'll look at the end. So you can see, you just do a common sense check. Lots of times when we're sewing, common sense is the most important thing because we're busy and we forget it. We know these things, we just forget them because we're in a hurry or we're trying to pay attention to other things. So I'll start sewing right here and go all the way to that folded edge. Back stitch, beginning and end, to make sure you sew with the proper seam allowance. Okay, again, I'm going to separate these two. So they were together like this. I will just flip that lining back to keep the seam allowance underneath the lining and just top stitch through the lining and that seam allowance, making sure I don't go past the stitches I just did. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my back exterior and my front exterior, I'm keeping the linings out of the way, and I'm just going to line up these two pieces here along this bottom edge. Get my strap out of the way before it falls down. And I'm just going to line up and sew this bottom edge. Sewing this bottom edge will allow us to be able to open it up and butterfly those seams just so it lays flat. And we can separate that seam and it'll look really nice because we won't have a bulky seam that's kind of folding up on itself. So it's just it's an extra step, but it's one that provides just a more professional look at the end. I'm going to backstitch when I start and stop and make sure that I sew with the proper seam allowance. Now that I have that bottom seam sewed, I'm going to open it up and butterfly that seam and sew on both sides of the seam to keep it laying flat. I just sew about 1/8 of an inch away. Let me get this lining out of the way of where I just stitched. There's the bottom seam from the wrong side and from the right side. Got to trim up those threads there. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to put our exteriors and our linings together. Here's the bottom we just sewed on the exterior, and here is the bottom. Here's the bottom of the lining. I'm going to start by matching up this zipper tape. We're starting with the edge that does not have any zipper hang, so the edge of the zipper that is folded. So we'll put those together, matching it all up. And I'm just going to push my zippers right now towards the exterior. We're going to match up those seams on that top B piece that are going in the opposite way, and we'll start clipping down the exterior all the way down to that notched edge. I'll start here at the bottom of the lining. Match up those notched edges right there. And continue clipping all the way down on the lining. So what you're going to do now is you're going to sew from one side all the way to the other. So you can start at the exterior of the lining, whichever one you want, but you'll backstitch where you start and stop and just go all the way down. So here's what I have at this point. I'm going to go ahead and push, I'm going to try to open these seams up so they can be kind of smooth and laying flat, and clip right there. So I got it laying flat, I'm going to clip there. And I'm going to do the official top stitch on the exterior. This is where we did that. This lining top stitch is going to be a little bit easier because it's going to kind of hold it in place so it's not riding up and getting in the way. And again, I'm just going to top stitch in between those marks that I made so that opening on the side is still open currently. We're coming up on this side seam between the exteriors, and so I'm going to make sure I use my finger to make sure it's flat and it's still butterflied open. If not, stick your hand in there and spread out that bulk. I'm just kind of pulling away a little bit. And here's what you have at this point. Crazy. Looks crazy. Okay, at this point, let's go ahead and put our zipper pull on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my exteriors together, get them to line up. I'm just going to put a clip right here because I don't want that to shift. That's where I want these pieces to stay. So I'm going to put a clip right there, and I'll put a clip actually on the teeth. So when I'm putting my zipper on, things aren't moving around. I'm going to check to make sure I did this the right way. Everything looks good. Yeah, everything looks good. I'm okay with that. So I'm going to separate these so I can finish sewing down this side. What I want to do is I want to pinch this zipper tape so that my teeth are actually poking towards the exterior. So I'm going to put a clip on the tape itself, and then I will put a clip down lower, kind of help it there too. I'm going to go ahead and match up these seams on the side and continue clipping on the exterior. Start down here with your lining. You will have to kind of pull your lining. It gets kind of, with that zipper, the way I have it clipped, it'll kind of, lining will kind of be bunched up around it, so you will have to pull it apart. So what I want to do is I want to start stitching here on my lining. You're going to stitch on the bottom, back stitch there, go all the way even over the zipper tape until you get to those teeth. Do not go over the teeth. If you find that your needle or your foot is pushing your zipper teeth, you need to kind of hold it in place, secure it, because you don't want it to push it. We want it to be just straight on there. So it's a little tricky, but you can do that. Then you'll back stitch and break your stitches there. Then we're going to flip the whole thing over, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the exterior, and I'll stop before I get to the teeth. At no point am I sewing over the teeth. You can see I sewed up to the teeth, but I did not go over them. So now I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the exterior. I'm going to trim my tape just a shade, not really anything at all. You really need to leave your zipper tape long. That part was just fraying. You can melt your zipper tape at this point to make sure it doesn't fray. Okay, got to add the opening here in our lining. So we're just going to stitch a little bit into our lining. We really want a nice big opening so we can pull this through. So line up the bottoms of this lining, back stitch, and just sew maybe an inch, inch and a half on each side of your box corner here on your lining. Now it's time to box these corners, and you'll have to open up your zipper to get down to this one, or at least I do. You don't have to, but I like to open everything up. I'm going to push on my bottom. You can see it wants to go where we butterflied that seam. It's really good to open up easily. And then I'm just going to butterfly the side seam and match those up. You can see it wants to do that perfectly. It's like wants to go that way. It doesn't fight you at all. Spread that out just a little. Flip there. Do the same thing for this other side. I'm going to go ahead and stitch the exterior and then I'll work on the lining. So whenever I'm boxing the corner, when I sew across, I want to really try to make sure I have a nice straight edge there to sew across. And I try to make sure that my seams are matched up nicely. So you can see that looks good. Let's do the other side. Push everything down, smash it flat. Let's do the same thing for the interior. Stick your hand in there, butterfly those seams on both the bottom and the side, and then push them together. Okay, now it is time to pull everything out. I am so excited to see how this looks. My, where I have this decavel, it's a little structure here, so it's going to take me a little bit of time to get this to come through. I am going to start with this corner. Take time to poke out your corners. Everything should look great. I'm going to, on my side here with this seam, I'm just going to push a little to get it to kind of pop a little bit out. You can see it's still down in there. I'm just wanting to push so it's rounded. Then I'm going to go ahead and close up my opening. Just going to fold those edges in and clip. And then I'll just sew like as close to the edge as possible on this bottom part here. Let's just sew across about 1/8 of an inch away to close up this opening. Tuck that all the way in. Push it up against those corners so it fits really nice. Look at that. That is a great fitting lining. Now, I know it is frustrating to birth a really tight fitting lining like that, but when you see how it looks at the end, you're just like, okay, worth it. Okay, let's trim up some of my threads here, and then we'll attach the strap. We'll be done. Oh my gosh. That's gorgeous. Okay, let me do that, and then I'm gonna make sure this is in frame. I'm the worst for having the end of the bag not be in frame. So pull out your strap. So I'm gonna have my strap up, and then I'm going to take this free edge and put it up through that rectangular ring, and then I will come up through the top of my adjustable bar, then back down. Let me make sure I have that correct. This is why it's best to wait on the end of this because it's so tricky. Yep, that's perfect. You can check your fit on this. If you already know this is going to be for you, you can go ahead and check it. Or if it's going to be for someone, you can check it with them. Otherwise, for me, I'm just going to clip it on and fold in the raw edge with my swivel hook, and I'm going to stitch. Okay, and now I'm going to hook this on. Let me get this all nice and tight. Okay, my camera is getting ready to stop, so I'm going to finish up. Fabric is from Jen's Fabric. The pattern is from KiteCo Creates. Thank you guys so much for watching the second sewing marathon of 2024. I really appreciate it. You guys are amazing, and thanks for spending the time with me. This pattern is awesome. I'm going to have the link to both the pattern and the fabric in my description, and I hope you guys have a great day and have fun watching everybody else's tutorials also.